Good morning, friends. This is Yagyadev, and I am presenting the economy survey for Empower IAS. So, in this lecture, earlier we were discussing about how the post-pandemic situation was improved by the government of India via taking various measures. So, in this chapter, we will be discussing how the services sector impacted in developing the economy in post-COVID infrastructure and development. So, services comprises of gross value added, that is at the producer's end. So, producer comprises of all the goods and all the services that he caters in order to develop the goods and services. Now, what is GDP? GDP is comprising of the consumption of all the things, that is consumption, and it also comprises of investment by the public, consumption by public, and investment by capitalists, then government expenditures minus export and import that are surrounded in the economic system, that is under the GDP. Now, GVA comprises of GDP adding to the services, subtracting the taxes on it, that is a gross value added, and it contributes over 50% of India's GDP in terms of service sector. However, it was reduced from 55% to 53% in the pandemic situation. So, we saw that in the first GDP situation, in the first lockdown period due to COVID-19, जैसे ही कोरोना का अटैक हुआ, there was lockdown, every industries were shut down, there was no movement of cargo, services, and lots of challenges were there, due to which the GVA sought to be declining by 2 percentile, that is it was declined from 55 to 53%. During the first half of 2020-22, service sector grew by 10.8%. सर्विस सेक्टर 10.8% से बढ़ते हुए देखा गया था. Then overall service sector, that is gross value added, grown by 8.2% in 2021 and 2022. So remember friends, this is very important for your prelims as well as mains point of view. तो हम थोड़ा सा इसे समझेंगे गहराई से how GVA works after the post pandemic period. GVA improve कब होता है फ्रेंड्स? जब आप बहुत सारे goods and services की delivery, transportation, service facilitation such as business, IT, banking and health, education, such services को आप prevail करते हो, that leads to increase in the gross value added, including the procurement and selling of the goods. यानी कि वस्तुओं का व्यापार होना ही GVA को improve करता है, and that improves after the second pandemic situation. That is again a challenge for the government to develop the GVA infrastructure to build the India in a holistic pattern. Now we will look into the further details of gross value added. That is, it is defined as the value of output less than the value of intermediate consumption, that is the total output in terms of GDP minus intermediaries equals to the gross value added, that is GVA, and GVA summation are added together, adding taxes and reducing subsidies in the product. We get the GDP at market price. So the formula that shows GDP at market price equal to sum of GVA at basic prices plus product of taxes minus subsidies. So GDP at market price equals to GVA plus taxes minus subsidies. GDP equals to GVA plus taxes minus subsidies. Now calculating into the formula, again we see GVA equals to GDP minus taxes plus subsidies. This caters the formula of GVA. Now gross domestic product is the value of taxes on goods, fewer subsidies on the added to the gross value added. that means gross value added is less, is added with the subsidies that produce the gross domestic product of an economy. तो किसी भी अर्थव्यवस्था की जब हम बात करते हैं तो जीडीपी इज द ग्रॉस टोटल ऑफ एनी थिंग्स दैट इज प्रोड्यूस्ड विद इन द बाउंड्री और टेरिटरी ऑफ अ कंट्री। किसी भी देश की सीमा के अंतर्गत जो भी चीजें पैदा की जाती हैं किसी भी उद्योग के द्वारा, दैट इज सकल घरेलू उत्पाद और ग्रॉस डोमेस्टिक प्रोडक्ट ऑफ एन इकोनॉमी। Okay friends, thus the GDP of any nation represents the sum total of gross value added in all the sectors of that economy during the said year after adjusting the taxes and subsidies. So we adjusted the taxes via GST, हमने goods and service taxes को impose किया friends, and there was a cascading rationalization of taxes in GST that was for 5, 12, 18 and 28%. Then we also provided subsidies on various products that were manufactured by the Indian industries that improved the GDP significantly. So what are unicorn startups? Unicorn startups are those startups such as कोई भी इंडस्ट्री हमने स्टार्ट की छोटी मोटी इन टर्म्स ऑफ MSME or any kind of enterprise or any organization that earlier cost something say 10 crores. So as the startup grew after a certain period of time and it reaches to a gross value of 10 billion US dollar in its surplus, then it is called as a unicorn startup. Remember friends, कोई भी संस्था स्थापित होने के बाद जैसे जैसे वो प्रॉफिट इनकर करती है एंड इट रीचेस टू अ कैपिटल ऑफ 1 बिलियन US डॉलर, देन इट इज कॉल्ड एज अ यूनिकॉर्न स्टार्टअप। तो उसे हम यूनिकॉर्न कहते हैं। नाउ व्हाट इज कॉमर्शियल सर्विस एक्सपोर्ट्स? द एक्सपोर्ट्स दैट आर डिटरमाइंड थ्रू द कॉमर्शियल सर्विसेज और आर मेड फॉर सर्विंग द कॉमर्शियल needs of the economy that are called as the commercial service exports, and our total service exports minus exports of the government services means total exports less than the government exports equals to commercial service export. Remember this formula, very important for your mains and prelims also. Okay, kindly note it down whenever you are studying. Note it down in your pen and paper, have a diary of notes to recall it in your mains also. Now international transaction services. Now it was started by the IMF's balance of payment manual 1993. So we saw that there was 1991 crisis. 1991 में भारत के सामने बहुत बड़ी आर्थिक विपदा आ गई थी जिसे हम कहते हैं ग्लोबल क्राइसिस, and we saw that there was LPG reforms. So international transaction service was started by IMF, that is International Monetary Fund. Again a Bretton Woods institution started in 1945. Bretton Woods institution which caters the output of intangible commodities that may be produced, transferred and consumed at the same time. वैसे उत्पाद जो कि प्रोडक्ट बनाने के बाद उनका कंजम्पशन, ट्रांसपोर्टेशन और कमर्शियलाइजेशन एट द पॉइंट ऑफ प्रोडक्शन टाइम हो जाता है, दैट आर कॉल्ड एज द इंटरनेशनल ट्रांजैक्शन सर्विसेज, इन विच देर आर IT सर्विसेज, यानी कि कोई भी सॉफ्टवेयर आप डेवलप करते हैं, एट द पॉइंट इट इज़ ट्रांसफर टू अ सर्टेन एप्स, it is transferred to different countries, different people who are using mobile phone, and they started using the app absolutely at the instant of time at which it has been manufactured. यानी कि कोई भी वैसा उत्पाद जो जब मैन्युफैक्चर हुआ हो उसी के इंस्टेंट ऑफ टाइम पे उपयोग में आया जा सके, दैट इज कॉल्ड एज अ इंटरनेशनल ट्रांजैक्शन इन सर्विसेज अकॉर्डिंग टू IMF. नाउ व्हाट इज अ ट्रांसपोर्ट बबल और एयर ट्रैवल अरेंजमेंट? पैंडेमिक पीरियड में हमने देखा था मित्रों भारत सरकार ने बहुत सारी योजनाएं चलाई थी इन ऑर्डर टू टेक बैक द ओवरसीज सिटीजन्स ऑफ इंडिया। भारत के बहुत सारे नागरिक जो विदेशों में कई जगह फंसे रह गए थे, उनको वापस अपने देश में लाने के लिए पेंडेमिक सिचुएशन को कैटर करते हुए भारत सरकार ने कई मित्र राष्ट्रों से और दैट मीन्स 35 नेशंस के साथ सरकार ने एग्रीमेंट साइन किया। दैट वाज अ ट्रैवल बबल एग्रीमेंट and there was separate Vande Bharat mission also. So in the travel bubble agreement, if one person is located in Singapore or say Japan or in Afghanistan, then there should be a 14 days quarantine period of that person. Then he should be taken along with other persons who are going to travel to India. वो सारे लोग जिनको भारत वापस लाना है उन्हें पहले उसी देश में क्वारंटाइन किया जाएगा, देन दे आर टेकिंग बैक टू द इंडिया इटसेल्फ। दैट वाज कॉल्ड एज अ ट्रैवल बबल एंड एयर ट्रैवल अरेंजमेंट फॉर द कोविड सिचुएशन। सो इकोनॉमी सर्वे अगेन फोकस कर रहा है कोविड सिचुएशन में गवर्नमेंट की क्या स्ट्रेटजीज रही इन टर्म्स ऑफ बारबेल, वाटरफॉल एंड एजाइल फ्रेमवर्क। दिस कम्स अंडर द एजाइल फ्रेमवर्क। देन देयर इज ए प्रॉब्लम, गवर्नमेंट कैटर्स इट वाया लूप। So taking back the passengers as well as goods or citizen of India trapped abroad. That was again a travel bubble situation. Then there was a transport bubble, friends. So in the transport bubble, when people are as well as goods are struck in certain country in parts of trade, then it will be taken out via Indian air route or airways. That was a transport bubble situation, and that was through regular international flights which were suspended. So it will be via bilateral ties and agreements. That is why it is called as a bubble. बबल मतलब जैसे गुब्बारों का बुलबुला होता है फ्रेंड्स, ऐसे हम गुब्बारे देखते हैं, बबल्स आर देयर, तो बबल्स में ओनली एयर इज देयर, that much you have filled. So that is a bubble situation. Now, so service sector growth as shown in the chart of GVA at basic price percent 7.2% in first quarter of 2018 and 19, and it was again the same and 1920. Now first lockdown period held, it grudged down to minus 8.4. आप देख रहे हैं बिल्कुल 180 डिग्री टर्न एंड इट गोज टू माइनस 8.4 ऑफ डिक्लिनेशन इन फर्स्ट कोविड लॉकडाउन. देन एज द लॉकडाउन eases, then it again comes back slowly, making a V-shaped recovery. Again remember, it is making a V-shaped recovery to 8.4% positive, 8.2% from minus 8.4%. Okay, so this again a recovery trend. Remember it, very very important. What it shows, friend, that Indian economy was quite compressed with the infrastructure, goods and services that were not that much volatile as compared to the global market that was completely surmounted by the COVID situation. So that is how Indian economy recovered by making a V-shaped consumption. Now what is turnaround time? So when there is a ship and it goes to a certain place, let us say ship है और एक पोर्ट पे जाती है कहीं भी, then the time taken by the ship to go and come back to its place. तो एक शिप को किसी पोर्ट पे जाना से मुंबई, and at the instant of point whenever it reaches to the port, the time is taken say 12:30, and it unlocks or delivers its goods, whatever it is carrying, containers or goods, in the period of time whatever it takes, say 24 hours, and it return to its the same destination, say चाबहार पोर्ट इन ईरान. तो किसी बोर्ड पे इसकी डिलीवरी टाइम taken by a ship to deliver its entire goods over the port and return back is called as the turnover time. Remember this fact again, that is called as a turnaround time by a ship. So in ocean shipping, the time taken between the arrival of the vessel and its departure refers to as the turnaround time, and UNCTAD has calculated the turnaround time globally was 1 day, that means 24 hours, and the turnaround time was slightly higher in the year 2090, that means 0.97 days. तो किसी व्हीकल को जाने में उसे एम्प्टी होके वापस आने में 0.97 was the earlier, and it was reduced to 24 hours, that is 1 day. Now the next impact of COVID-19 sequential recovery, we saw that the COVID situation contacted the services such as information, communication, financial, professional and business services have remained resilient, and impact has been much more severe on the contact based services. That is, there are two kinds of services. First is the contact based services. Okay, let us have a look. First is the contact based services. Second is the non-contact based services. सेवाएं दो प्रकार की होती हैं मित्रों. पहला जिसमें कि कांटेक्ट होता है, देयर इज पर्सन टू पर्सन इंटरेक्शन, बातचीत होती है, लेन देन होता है, सच एज बैंकिंग और एजुकेशन और मार्केटिंग, such as vegetables marketing, going to certain place. Non-contact services, IT infrastructure, then again in terms of internet banking and taking e-passes or e-wage generation, that are all the non-contact services. Now the services were such as tourism, retail trade, hotel, entertainment, recreation, these are all contact services. Entertainment के लिए आप सिनेमा हॉल जाते हो, होटल जाते हो, to eat something you go to restaurant, then recreation, these are all contact based services. There is one-to-one interaction with the person. Then non-contact services such as information, communication, mobile, financial services, banking, in which there is no person-to-person interaction, that were remained resilient. That means non-contact services remain to through a development pattern during the lockdown situation, and they were quite resilient, they were growing. But the contact based services, hotel industry, restaurants, retail trade and tourism declined during the lockdown, and public administration, defense, inclusive expenditure, they all were declined, and government on the hand services such as health, education, recreation, etc. were all on the decline. Now they were on contraction mode by 4.6% of contraction. Okay friends, remember this fact for your prelims as well as mains. Next is the trends in high frequency indicators. So what are the high frequency indicators, friends? The first is the purchasers and managers index, that is PMI services sector activity caused by PMI services which had fluctuated during the lockdown. PMI services जो थी, purchaser managers index, that were fluctuating and reducing. Now fluctuation, आप पूछें क्यों fluctuation हो रहा था? So as you know, the service sector in which there was a contact based services, so non-contact services were improving but the contact based services were declining. अब ये contact based service decline हो रही है तो इंडेक्स में उनकी अगर काउंटिंग हो रही है, दैट विल शो रिडक्शन which is easing of the restrictions on the PMI services has taken record strongest jump over 10 years to 58.4 reading over 50 indices expansion in the October 2021. तो इसमें भी रिकवरी देखने को मिली है मित्रों 58.4% की रीडिंग, दैट इज राइज इन द PMI इंडेक्स. Now, next is the freight traffic and the passenger traffic. Freight traffic considered as the railway logistics and transportations. Is called as the freight traffic. So, as expected, the freight traffic, rail, airways and port had fallen sharply. That means railway had no such resilient methodology to transport. The container ratio was reduced, airports were contracted as well as the ports, shipping ports also contracted. That all comprises of the freight trade, which all were declining situation. But in the second lockdown, after the post lockdown, they started to improve as the economy gradually opened up, and Indian Railway recorded almost 16% increase. Despite the lockdown opening, railways show 16% of increase in the service delivery as compared to the corresponding period during the pre-pandemic 19 and 20. Indian ports, coming to the ports, जो बंदरगाह हैं, who are taking the ships cargoes, recorded 10 percentile growth. Now railway again grew 10%, ports growth 10%. Railway 16% growth, ports 10% growth as of November 2021, and have almost reached the pre-pandemic level of 864.3 million tons. 864.3 million tons तक पहुंचा है during the April-November 2019. Moreover, it is suggested that air passenger traffic is gradually reaching the pre-pandemic level, as the railway passenger traffic on the other hand is still struggling below the pre-pandemic level. So जैसे जैसे लॉकडाउन ओपन हुआ, लोग ट्रांसपोर्ट करना और ट्रैवल करना स्टार्ट कर रहे हैं, दैट शोज अ डेटा और बल्क ऑफ पीपल हु आर coming for travel and tourism, that raises the airways and railways transport. Now bank credit to service sector, that is banking credit, decelerated to 3.6% at the end of November 2021. Banking sector shows a reduction in services. तो बैंकिंग क्षेत्र में 3.6% का रिडक्शन हुआ है एंड ऑफ 2021 एंड में रिडक्शन पाया गया था. अर्लियर इट वाज 8.2% a year ago. It is important to note that corporates have raised more money through capital market rather banking capital. So bankings were declining due to lacking of the overall funding which were propagated by RBI. RBI के द्वारा फंड डिसबर्स किए जा रहे थे बैंकिंग सेक्टर्स को, स्टिल they are not able to reach the MSMEs and other corporate world. So how the corporate sector was taking the money for their expenditures? That comes from the share market, that is a part of the corporate level, that is a capital market creation. So capital market was able to take or to make the money for the corporates and MSME. Now we can see the trend in the banking credit to the services, that is growth of banking credit in the service subsectors. First the services were at 10% percentile, then transport operators around 8 percentile, then the computer software around 1. Then tourism and hotel restaurants were highest around 20 percentile. Then shipping industry showing a quite high growth in November 2021 of around 40 percentile, which was earlier negative, that was -5. Then the professional services such as chartered accountancy, corporate services, they all declined to -20 or more than that, around -30 level. Okay. And in post lockdown situation they were again negative. Wholesale trade, as you see, in comparison to food, was again at high price during the first lockdown 20 and reduced to 15 percentile. Then retail trade was around 10 percentile and in the second period around 1 percentile. Commercial real estate at first instant was around 1 percentile and non-banking financial companies NBFCs were almost same during the both situation 2020 and 2021. Remaining services were first lockdown they were in growth, but in second lockdown they are negative -0.5. Now coming to the next, service sector share at state and union territory levels. The service sector across the states is called as the gross state value added. We saw that value added, that is GVA of India, is GDP plus services minus investments. Now GVA in the state is called as GSVA, that is GSVA comprises of gross produce in a state, that is GDP of state produced items plus services minus taxes. Here it was minus taxes. Now it reaches 12 out of 33 states and UTs. Chandigarh stands out at 74 percentile. The highest among all the union territories was Chandigarh. Remember this data again. Highest scoring was Chandigarh in GSVA. That means Chandigarh was performing quite high in terms of production of goods as well as services. And Sikkim remains the lowest of 24.25%. Highest Chandigarh and lowest is Sikkim. It is around 24.25%. Maharashtra and Karnataka are the top two contributors of services GSV, whereas the services GSVA contracted in Rajasthan, Jharkhand and Punjab. Remember this fact for your prelims as well as mains point of view. Now FDI flow into these services. So in the first lockdown period we saw a decline in FDI, and which is the highest recipient in the Indian economy, and around $81.97 billion of FDI is consumption in India. $81.97 billion of FDI was recorded in 2020 and 2021. And 2021. Now, according to the World Investment Report of UNCTAD, that is United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, the report shows that India is the 5th largest recipient of FDI in the world. So, India is the 5th largest FDI receiver in terms of the foreign direct investment. That means a capital creation in India is highest in comparison to the other countries of the world, according to World Investment Report. Remember this report published by UNCTAD, World Investment Report by UNCTAD. Now, trade in the services sector shows that export of the services shows a quite high margin, and India remained among the top 10 service exporters countries of the world, and its share in the world commercial services exports increasing from 3.4% in 2019 to 4.1% in 2020. So we saw that there was little bit of rise in the export sector, is 3.4 to 4.1% rise in 2020. Next is the graph showing the world commercial service exports in reference to the India, which is showing a growth of in terms of year 1991, 1991 में देख रहे हैं मित्रों 0.5% है, और फिर ये इट इज़ showing a rising trend in year 2005. It raised to a level of 2 percentile to 2.5. Then again it grew constantly even in pandemic period, and it grew to highest level of 4.0% despite the lockdown. Okay. Now, during the H1 of 2021-2, the vast involution of drive and pickups in the global demand, Indian service exports is increasing by 21.6% as against fall of 7.8%. So it grew by 21.6%. तो भारत का जो सर्विस क्षेत्र है मित्रों वो अगेन ग्रोथ करते हुए दिख रहा है with 21.6 percentile, and which was a fall of 7.8% during the same period of lockdown. Now, service import, India service import decline of 8.4% in 2021-2, and during H1 2021-2022 growth of services imports was 20.7%. सर्विस का जो इम्पोर्ट है वो 20.7% रहा इन द फर्स्ट क्वार्टर ऑफ H1. दैट अगेन मेक्स अ ह्यूज लैप फॉर द रिलैक्सेशन ऑफ लॉकडाउन restrictions and rise in the domestic economic activities. Now coming to the next slide, we see that major sectors and subsectors of performance such as tourism sector, which were quite declining in first lockdown period. During the first lockdown period of pandemic, people derailed from traveling and making the tourist plans as the ports, airports and all the tourist destinations were closed. But as the lockdown relaxes, there was huge tourism incorporated. Now, Directorate General of Civil Aviation (DGCA) has suspended all commercial international flights March 2020. Restriction was extended till February 28, 2022. तो 28 फरवरी 2022 तक ये लॉकडाउन में फ्लाइट्स और ट्रैवल डेस्टिनेशंस क्लोज्ड रहे. दैट कॉज अ ह्यूज डिक्लाइन इन द टूरिज्म सेक्टर. बट आफ्टर द ओपनिंग ऑफ द टूरिस्ट स्पॉट, द वंदे भारत मिशन was there, and Vande Bharat mission was for the taking back to the citizens of India who were struggling in certain place with a certain level of problem. So by making Vande Bharat mission, Government of India led the comeback of all the citizens who were trapped in certain countries and made travel arrangement and transport bubble. That was called as a travel bubble, which I explained earlier. Then IT and BMP services were again at gross high, and in major segment it saw a quite rising trend. So during 2021, the ITBMP services revenues of US dollar 194.4 billion. ITBMP services gross for 194 billion US dollar and grew by 2.26%. Now USA followed by United Kingdom remained in the biggest source of export revenues. USA इंग्लैंड के बाद हाईएस्ट सोर्स ऑफ एक्सपोर्ट बना. व्हाई इट बिकेम द एक्सपोर्ट कैपिटल? बिकॉज यूएस companies that were producing lots of goods, they were able to serve these goods in terms of their packages which were available. So accounting of about 62% of total ITBMP excluding the hardware and e-commerce. अगर e-commerce और hardware sector को exclude करते हैं मित्रों, still there was a 62% of growth in ITBMP exports. Now, survey observed the number of policy initiatives taken by the government to promote the relaxation of services, other service provider regulations, and the telecom sector reforms and consumer protection rules of 2020, जो कि सुधार करके e-commerce rule 2020 लाया गया. E-commerce rule of 2020, which make the online telecommunication and the trade by telephonic call very easy and cheaper for the global market in terms of India. Now, ports, shipping and waterways services. Developments of ports is crucial for the economy. So as we saw that during the lockdown situation, the cargo traffic of India decreased by 5.4%. जितने भी कार्गो ट्रांसपोर्ट हो रहे थे भारत के पोर्ट्स पे वो 5.4% तक रिड्यूस हो गए. एंड द कार्गो कैपेसिटी ऑफ ऑल द पोर्ट्स हैज इंक्रीज्ड टू 1246.86 million tons per annum as of March 2021. Then all major ports except SMP Kolkata, Vizag Port, Mormugao Port recorded highest growth in the traffic. Among them, the Kamarajar Port in Chennai recorded the highest growth of 70.9%. Remember friends, the highest growth at Kamaraj Port, 70.9% of export, followed by JNPT Port, Jawaharlal Nehru Port Trust of 27.9 percentile. Now, turnaround time at the JNPT port is 1.16. किसी भी जहाज को आने में और वापस जाने में 1.16% का turnaround time है. Then turnaround time at the Vizag, that is Visakhapatnam and Mormugao ports is 3.15 days. That means they are taking more times in comparison to the other ports which are just taking 1 day to deliver a cargo by a ship and return back to its destination. Then these two ports, Visakhapatnam and Mormugao, are taking 3 days, 3.15 days. That means 3 days and 15 hours. That is again very high. Now, to address the problem and shortage of containers, there was a holistic plan by the government and there was an adoption of multi-pronged strategies such as Sagar Mala program. Now what did government do? तो जो ports पे ships की turn over time बढ़ रही थी तो उसको cater करने के लिए government started a Sagar Mala project in which all the ports were connected with the nearby rivers. All the ports were connected so that if any port is facing problem, so the cargoes can deliver it to the next port and can take a container from other port also or take back. Now this was called as a cargo issue. Now the growth in traffics of all the ports is shown by this graph, which again highlights the 2013-14 database, that is of 4 percentile in first quarter. Then it shows a serpentile rise and fall, so it rise to around 8 percentile in 2014-15, declines to 2 percentile in 15-16, again show a consistent rise till 6% till 2018-19, but in first lockdown, जैसे ही फर्स्ट कोविड सिचुएशन पेंडेमिक there was lockdown by government, it declines very hugely to the period of 2020-2021 by -6. You see huge declination. Then again growth as of a V-shaped recovery by making a growth around 10 percentile. So you see what is a grudge and rise in the growth of transportation sector in all the ports that were having the ships and containers. So this data is shown by Ministry of Ports, Shipping and Waterways. Remember this data again for your PT and mains. Now coming to the space sector, that is again very important for the government as well as the global agencies, as all the programs that are taken through the space sector that leads to a prediction of temperature, precipitation, monsoon, weather, cyclone, so on and so forth, that impact the agriculture as well as the other parts of the economy. Now space sector was provided with the impetus of New Space India Limited. A new body was created, NSIL, by making the public sector undertaking, and its sector is to own an operational launch vehicle and space assets of ISRO. तो न्यू स्पेस इंडिया लिमिटेड एक PSU बना दी गई, and what will be its function? It will work to launch the ISRO space vehicles and shuttles and rockets. Now why a new space agency? So new space agency as a government organization will help the existing body in order to launch certain rockets and satellites in the space, and that will again ease the business, ease the process of launching, which was very complex and again single-handedly taken by the ISRO. Now Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Center, new center created, that is in space, IN space, again which shall act as a promoter and regulator of space activities in India by NGPE, non-governmental and private entities. So entities such as certain colleges, institutions, certain private companies who also want to launch their satellite to the space, they can take the help of in space to launch their vehicles. Now there were again two more measures were taken, that was Spacecom and Space RS. Remember this fact for your prelims as well as mains. Spacecom and Space RS, these policies to provide a predictability, forward looking and well defined enabling regularity regime for space activities in the country. तो ये दो रेगुलेटरी बॉडीज बनाएगी, स्पेसकॉम एंड स्पेस आरएस, ये पॉलिसीज इसलिए दैट मीन्स government if want to regulate the bodies who are acting for the space purposes can be regulated by Spacecom and Space RS. Then in last 3 years number of startups in the space sector raised from 11 to 47 in 2021. तो इससे क्या हुआ, स्टार्टअप बढ़ गए स्पेस सेक्टर में, and there were new guideline for the startups, that means इंट्रोडक्शन ऑफ सेल्फ सर्टिफिकेशन रेजीम, जो भी स्टार्टअप्स हैं उनके रूल्स नए आ गए, स्टार्टअप रूल्स, दैट मीन्स एनी स्मॉल कंपनी कैन डू इट्स प्रोसेसिंग बाय सेल्फ सर्टिफिकेशन. तो ये सेल्फ सर्टिफिकेशन कर सकते हैं. Then all entities required to follow self certification and follow the guidelines as opposed to obtaining a prior approval for startup in terms of use of geospatial data and maps. Relaxation of restricted areas. Mapping activities are prohibited only for specific attributes to highly sensitive locations. वैसे locations that are nearby the international boundaries, strategic sectors, mines, nuclear power stations that are strategic and important sector, उनकी geospatial information किसी भी private company को नहीं मिलेगी. Then specific permission for Indian entities, that is only Indian owned and controlled entities are permitted to use geospatial data. वैसी entities जिन्हें सरकार ने लाइसेंस दिया है through permitted agreement, they will be only able to take the geospatial data above certain spatial accuracy. Then use specific technologies such as ground truthing and verification, and can conduct activities such as street view surveying and surveying of Indian territorial waters. तो ऐसी कंपनीज क्या कर सकती हैं, कोई भी स्ट्रीट व्यू जो हो रही है किसी मॉल के अराउंड, सम लोकेलिटी, सम जू, सम पार्क्स, तो उनके अराउंड जो लोग गैदर हो रहे हैं उनकी स्पेसिफिक डेटा वो ले सकती है एंड दे कैन यूज इट. So this data is only to take the basic information of the customer who are using certain products, such as some people are using too much Coca-Cola in summer season. That is collected in a certain specific place such as a mall or a park or nearby certain monuments, Taj Mahal or such areas which have huge consumption. तो ये डेटा लेना अलाउ किया गया है. Now what are the new drone approvals? There are new rules. So unique authorization number, कोई भी ड्रोन अगर यूज़ कर रहा है तो उसके लिए क्या बनाया गया है, यूनिक ऑथराइजेशन नंबर. तो हम देखते हैं मित्रों, नए नए आजकल कॉलेज के स्टूडेंट्स भी ड्रोन बना के उड़ा रहे हैं, छोटे छोटे ड्रोन्स. दे आर कैरिंग सर्टेन कैमरा, देन आईसी चिप एंड वॉइस रिकॉर्डर. तो ये ड्रोन क्या करता है, when it is passing by certain area or locality, it collects the data by capturing the video image and all the voice information of that area. So इसके लिए कुछ guidelines बना दी गई. ड्रोन पोर्ट ऑथराइजेशन, तो किसी पोर्ट पे ड्रोन को ले जाना और उसका यूज़ करना, that is authorized. Then student remote pilot license, if any student of a college or university is using a drone, that he has to take a pilot license. Then authorization of R&D organization, research and development organization को भी authorize किया गया है. Then operator permit to the operator who is driving the drone. Then acceptance of existing drones. पहले पुराने मॉडल के ड्रोन्स चल रहे थे, they were being used for a scientific research and agricultural or flood affected areas or mine areas, so they are also accepted. Import of electronic products, तो import जो हो रहे हैं ड्रोन रिलेटेड टेक्नोलॉजीज के चिप्स वो भी एक्सेप्टेबल हैं. Then certification and maintenance of drones is also acceptable. E-certificate of conformance, when someone is using a drone such as a college student or any person or a scientist, then he should have to take a e-certificate for using the drone. Certification of manufacturing and airworthiness, if someone is using the drone he needs airworthiness certificate. What is airworthiness? So airworthiness is a phenomena in which you have to follow the moral guideline of not interfering any person's private place, such as आप ड्रोन उड़ा रहे हो तो किसी भी होटल में नहीं ड्रोन जाना चाहिए. there should not be interference in private person's home, और किसी के बेडरूम में नहीं ड्रोन चला जाएगा. that is a certification of airworthiness. Now remote pilot instructor authorization. Certain remote pilot is using a drone in a hidden way, यानी कि कोई रिमोट पायलट है इंडिया में बैठ के चाइना में ड्रोन के द्वारा चीज़ों को देख रहा है, then he should need to have a authorization. Then unique prototype identification number, there is ID number for the drone. Oh, we saw that we are using a certain car or certain motorcycle, then there is chassis number, vehicle number, DL number, such kind of numbering is also provided. That is a unique number for the drone which you are using. तो ये नए गाइडलाइंस हैं. Remember, it can be asked why UPSC, PT और मेंस, बिकॉज ये वेरी न्यू इमर्जिंग टेक्नोलॉजी है ड्रोन टेक्नोलॉजी, तो गवर्नमेंट इस पे UPSC इस पे क्वेश्चन दे सकते हैं. नाउ स्टार्टअप सेक्टर्स, कमिंग टू द सेक्टर्स ऑफ स्टार्टअप. ड्यूरिंग 2021 government recognized over 14,000 new startups as compared to 733 during 2016 and 17. 16-17 में to 733 startups were there, and which grew to 14,000 new startups. तो हम क्या देख रहे हैं? Despite lockdown, the startup is increasing, especially in Delhi NCR and Bengaluru and Mumbai. So these places are showing rise in the growth of startups. In such firms, when there is a startup availability, there is seed funding, there is regulation by MSME Acts, तो startup बढ़ते हुए दिख रहे हैं. Over the recent year, Delhi has replaced Bangalore as the startup capital of India. Delhi, as being as national capital, also proved itself as the startup capital of India. With total of 11,308 startups, Maharashtra has the highest number of recognized startups. Again, the Maharashtra comes at the next stage of 11,308 recognized startups. That means they are registered by the government. Further, the survey stated India has record number of startups, 44, reaching unicorn startup in 2022. 44 unicorn startup. What are unicorn startup, students? The startup which grew up to a level of $1 billion US. ऐसे स्टार्टअप जिनकी $1 billion US तक ही कैपिटल पहुंच गई है, that is called as unicorn startup. And that are 44 in numbers. 44 की संख्या में ऐसे स्टार्टअप हैं. Now let us look at the India's map that shows the growth of a startup. So we see many yellow lines. So yellow वाले जितने भी हैं, light yellow, that is in the range of 1 to 50. 1 to 50 is maximum startups in Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Odisha, then in Bihar also, and Assam, Arunachal Pradesh, such are 1 to 50. Also in this area of Maharashtra and Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, and Rajasthan, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh also comprises of 1 to 50. Now the areas which deep yellow color shows 101 to 200, यानी कि 101 से लेके 200 तक नए स्टार्टअप की संख्या जो देखने को मिल रही है हमें नियर बाय मुंबई. That means Solapur, Nagpur region, and again in some part of Madhya Pradesh, in Gujarat, Rajkot area, in Telangana, Hyderabad area, then again this Tuticorin, then Vizag area. Such areas are showing 1 to 51 to 100. Kolkata also 51 to 100 number of startup. Now graph showing red color, that is 201 and above startup. 200 या 200 से अधिक की संख्या में जहाँ पे स्टार्टअप कंपनीज ओपन हुई हैं. That is again area of Delhi NCR, highest startup in Delhi NCR. Then again huge red color in area of Mumbai and Pune, Mumbai Pune का zone. Then again huge red color in Bengaluru. then Kerala, this red color, then again red color near the Kanpur Lucknow region of Uttar Pradesh. Remember this fact. Now patent again makes a huge issue in the various sectors which were lacking in the authenticity as well as the intellectual property, catering the huge need of certain laws. So Government of India created various laws, and there was upfront from 45,444 in 2016-17 to 58,502 number of patents. यानी पहले patents 45,000 थे and it grew to 58,502 patents in the year 2020-2021. यानी कि क्या हो रहा है, बहुत सारे बुक राइटर्स, इंटेलेक्चुअल प्रॉपर्टी डेवलपर्स, ऑथर्स, क्रिएटर्स वे सामने आ रहे हैं एंड दे आर टेकिंग द पेटेंट्स ऑफ देयर इंटेलेक्चुअल प्रॉपर्टी. Patents granted in India have gone up from 9,847 to 28,931 during the same time period. पेटेंट की संख्या लगातार बढ़ती हुई दिख रही है 9,847 to 28,391 and it is remarkable progress, but the number of patents granted in India is still a fraction compared to patents granted in China, USA, Japan, Korea. Now, economy survey is also taking the comparative analysis of the patents that are taken by Japan, USA, China and Korea, in which there is a high number of patents which is quite low in comparison to India. भारत की तुलना में इन देशों में पेटेंट्स की संख्या काफ़ी ज़्यादा है. Still, we should not bother about that number. We should bother about how intellectual property, at how much rate we are developing. So, the rate of development of IPR and filing patents is quite high in India. So, that means India is doing quite well in patents. Okay friends, आप इसे याद रखेंगे. Now, research and development sector. We will look into the R&D sector, which surely demarcated the certain regions for the same, such as India's expenditure on research and development activities, which was 0.7% of its GDP in 2020. Secondly, the average of the pendency of final decision in acquiring the patents in India is higher than the other countries. That was what I was saying, that when there is a patent filing of certain intellectual property, यानी कि किसी author ने कोई book लिखी, उसकी patent filing की जा रही है, that rate of patent filing in India is quite high in comparison to other Western nations. That shows again a R&D, research and development in such sectors is quite high, and it is a 0.7% of GDP of India. Remember this data for your prelims as well as mains point of view. So, WIPO, average pendency, World Intellectual Property Organization, which calculates the rate of all the patents filed within a territory, that was in Brazil first 62.3% and in India 42.0%, first office action 18, and in second final decision. So, final decision of patent in India is quite high as of 42%. In UK it is 25.0 at first place, first office situation, then second situation 37.0%. In Mexico the first percentile is 3.0 and second is 36.0. USA 15.4 and the final stage 20.8. And in China 14.4 in first stage, in second stage 20.0, Korea 11.1 and 15.8 in second stage, Australia it is 7.7 at first, 15.4 at In Japan, we see 10.2 at first stage, 15.0 at second stage. In Russia, it is quite low, 3.1 first stage, 4.1 in second stage. Remember this data for your prelims as well as mains point of view. So, we should take the lecture after a short while of break. So, take certain tea and coffee and return back after 15 minutes. Okay.